Today we're going to be talking about modern ERP strategies with Microsoft Dynamics 365 Finance and Supply Chain Management. Hello, everyone. My name is Dan Norkin, co-founder with Envision Blockchain. As you can see, we're a Microsoft partner in the space, members of the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance. Also, we are certified within the Linux Foundation, also Porter certified and partners. But actually today, we are not going to be talking too much about blockchain. We're actually going to be talking about the very beginnings of, kind of data modernization, if you will. And we have a lot of content to cover, so we're going to go ahead and just get started here. Just kind of taking a step back, as you could see, we'll be talking about Microsoft Dynamics Finance and Operations primarily, but CIO.com put out an article about a year ago. This was in 2019. And this is just something interesting to discuss as kind of like a starting point over here. So we have 10 signs that you have outdated IT systems and that they are killing your business processes. For example, if you see that you have dysfunctional workflows and processes, inability to capitalize on new opportunities, slowing or stalled growth, sagging sales, flatlining IT productivity, and inability to make changes dynamically in real time, declining market share, siloed systems, creaky core applications, reliance on orphan applications. I mean, this is something that you're probably shaking your head as you're watching this, and it's a need, right? So we have these IT systems, and essentially these IT systems are really supposed to help you out. But there's a certain point in time where they actually start killing your business. And we're going to discuss exactly, what are some of the points that can actually take you from the point where, you see that you're having these, siloed systems, for example, just to pick on that, or reliance on an orphan application, which is kind of a siloed system in a way, flatlining IT productivity, so on and so forth. We're going to go ahead and actually put that together as a way that you can start to imagine where modernization begins, right? So again, the software that we have is very important. I say we because I'm assuming that most folks that are in this presentation are IT focused. And the systems that we have should enable us as opposed to, prevent us. So with that in mind, we just want to fast forward to the next couple slides here. And for example, right, what we want to do is, again, because the title is Microsoft Dynamics 365, but that's not all that exists, right? So the enterprise resource platforms that we're using, there's so many to choose from. So for example, you can take a look at the GARTNER Magic Quadrant for cloud ERP for product-centric enterprises. For example, you could see that Oracle is listed as a leader. And then there's also, in visionaries, you have Infor, Epicor, Oracle again with NetSuite. You have IFS, which is something that we're familiar with. QAD, Acumatica is in the niche players, Plex Systems as well. And something else that we just want to highlight, of course, is that the Microsoft solution we'll be talking about is listed as a visionary. So, why did it get to be a visionary over here? We're just going to talk about this really quickly before we get into, the meat and potatoes of everything. Is essentially that Gartner defines a product-centric cloud ERP suite as a set of loosely coupled products comprising of operational ERP, got to be able to handle that. Everything from your supply chain and manufacturing, demand management, order management. I mean, we're going to cover all that a little bit later, but it should also have financial management functionalities. And those vendors that provided only financial management as a suite, they're in a completely separate quadrant, if you will, a separate category, right? So for this one, we need to have operationals, we need to have financials, we need to have purchasing of goods, services, capital equipment, etc. We also have to have human resources as well, ACM, cost management for staffing and operational resources. And also there needs to be a need for specialized industry-specific modules or applications, right? So the ability to be able to configurable to whatever the business needs is, that's exactly what this product-centric enterprises quadrant is all about. You see that Microsoft is not the only one there, but is very popular. Just to take a look at another industry research, if you will. So Nucleus Research ERP Technology Value Matrix in 2020. You could see here we have leaders. Again, we're talking about Acumatica. We'll be talking about D365, of course, Oracle, CISPro, Deltek, Infor. Those are leaders. We have facilitators, we have core providers, we have experts. So there is no lack of systems that a business could use. And just to kind of, again, take a look at what it is that Nucleus was looking at, is that enterprise resource planning software is an indispensable part of the enterprise software ecosystem. So again, just reiterating what we said earlier, is that another consideration was that there needed to be financial performance within this ERP. There need to be manufacturing processes and procedures. It needs to be able to handle business logistics, supply chain as a whole, and also keep in mind for regulatory compliance. The last little bit of industry information that we'll present over here is around the Forrester Wave Customer Service Solutions. This is a little bit dated. This is back in Q2 2019. And again, here we're talking about specific on customer service solutions, right? So this is a really important part of the ERP. You may not think about that because we may just be familiar with the customer service desk, like a Zendesk or something like that. But from and lo and behold, we have Zendesk on here, we have ServiceNow, Microsoft. But what's interesting about this study is that the Forrester Wave, what they did was they really, it's like you take your card for an inspection. There's really this 33 criterion evaluation of customer service providers, where we're just quoting here is that Microsoft is the only vendor of these that was listed that provides hardware, software, IoT platforms that really enables this end-to-end customer service. So, this was just a little bit of an intro. We wanted to provide some sort of a industry roundup, if you will, that kind of talks about, what else is going on in this industry. Businesses need software in order to handle all of these different pieces that I just mentioned earlier. And that's kind of a good lead in to this part. So again, I'm going to go through this really quick. I looked at the invite, and it looked like the invite was really for an hour. But if you look at the registration page, this is only a 30-minute presentation. So I may go over a little bit, but I'm going to try to aim to cap this at the 30-minute mark. So, I'm going to go through this quick. Again, for those that have joined, if there's any questions that you have afterwards, just feel free to send me an email. It's a lot of familiar faces that I see here, right? So, again, I really appreciate everyone for coming out here during, this Thanksgiving break. For those, I see some that are not in the U.S. So for you guys, it's business as usual. For those that are in the U.S., obviously, thank you for, coming to this pre-Thanksgiving food for thought as we're talking about. So talking about what we're here to discuss is around the total economic impact of Microsoft Dynamics 365 Finance and Operations, the Microsoft Dynamics Supply Chain Management. So you see, it's kind of split out in two different ways, and that's on purpose because there's this Microsoft change. It used to be called Finance and Operations, but now it's actually split up in two different SKUs and two different softwares, if you will, two different licenses. There's one for finance and there's one for supply chain management. What's cool about this, what's really interesting is, just like the GARTNER report and the other report said that, they needed to take all these finance and operations and compliance and supply chain and warehouse and all that, put into one bubble. That's exactly what Microsoft Dynamics 365 Finance and Supply Chain Management is really all about. So, you purchase a license and boom, out of the box, you have all your finance modules. For example, with finance, you have your accounts payable, accounts receivable, budgeting, cash flow, bank management, cost accounting, expense management, fixed assets, general ledger, financial reporting, and payroll. Again, this is just on the finance side of it. When you take a look at the supply chain management side of it, out of the box, you have asset management, inventory management, IoT, master planning, procurement and sourcing, which is really, also part of the sales and marketing, which is kind of the other side of it. You have product information management, production control, service management, warehouse and transportation management. So all of this used to be all bundled up into one license so that you pay one license and you get all these modules. Now Microsoft split that up, but that's okay, because if you do have access to two of these licenses, these modules could really be mixed together to create your entire end-to-end solution. And for those that have seen our demos, we've definitely been able to showcase how you take, for example, procurement and sourcing, and you use accounts payable and you send POs and things like that. But what's interesting is that Forrester, this is now 2 years old, but it's still relevant today. So in 2018, what they did was they performed this total economic impact of this particular software. And if you have to leave and you don't want to stay for the entire time, and I don't blame you, this is kind of like, the too long, didn't read. This is it right here. Total benefits. I'm going to break these down section by section. I'm going to go through this quickly, but here's a quick analysis of the benefits that came out of this report. Is that you see the net present value of operational efficiency has been calculated to 39 million. For employee productivity is 20 million. Again, this is after 3 years. You have wholesale profit of 3.3. You have retail profit of 1.2 million, and legacy cost avoidance, which is 10.6. Now, again, this is just the total benefits. What they also did was they also went into the total costs, and we'll explain a little bit about that. So just to give, a little bit of a picture, and the operational efficiency savings really came from being able to have this connected infrastructure. The employee productivity savings really came from employees being able to experience automation. The increased wholesale profit really came from a more customer-centric solution than what was already implemented in the customer's environment. Along with the increased retail profit, this is really interesting, and I'm excited to get into this one because, as you could imagine, if you had a business that had retail channels, for example, and you had a central distribution center, and then you had, I don't know, let's say 100 retail stores across the world, how do you keep track of all that, right? So when you have slippage, you lose money, but when you have now this way to forecast and, kind of like the all-seeing data transparency of what's going on, this is where you can start to realize this increased retail profit. And then legacy cost avoidance is 10.6 million. This comes from, probably everyone is thinking this is as easy as moving from on-prem to the cloud, right? So we'll get into that. Some of the factors that wasn't quantified, but it's important to talk about, is that, and we'll explain who said what, but essentially the customers that were interviewed, and we'll explain what the methodology is in the next slide, is that, the customers did say that by adopting a solution like this is, first and foremost, the cloud simplicity with enhanced system performance is something that was unanimous. Improved user experience with a more pleasant user interface and greater flexibility to access systems anytime, anywhere. That's also part of the cloud, but it also speaks to the kind of direction that Microsoft D365 has been taking from being a ERP system to now they're kind of looking to brand themselves as a business application where you can configure and you can, kind of replace the skins, if you will, right? One of our favorite things in our past life was implementation of Microsoft SharePoint. And everyone jokes that everyone hates the way that SharePoint looks, and everyone loves to hate it. So what did they do is they said, hey, look, with Dynamics 365, we're going to give you a new user face, and we're going to be able to now integrate this with, I don't know if anyone's familiar with the Common Data Service, the CDS, so that you can actually build your own custom portals and embed that right into the D365 backend. Also, unquantified benefits include gained agility to quickly deploy and integrate new lines of business, reducing labor costs and accelerating time to market. You also had increased security, governance, and fraud prevention, and attain the ability to build applications that leverage core ERP data without risk of breaking ERP functionality. And the last two are very important, because if you take a look at a system that might be homebrew, right? You might have built it internally yourself, and this has been a common happening within companies. Then you have to pass security tests and everything like that. But since D365 is based on Azure, and then you inherently get all of the security that Azure comes with that, and all the ISO compliance and so on and so forth, it just makes it easy to adopt. So how did we come to all these benefits? So for those that are not familiar with the TEI framework and methodology, it starts out very simply with due diligence. It starts out with just understanding, what are we looking to do? Then they perform customer interviews. We'll talk about who they were, what their problems were. What they did then, they took these customer interviews, these 6 companies, it might be a little more. I'm just counting on the slide ahead. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 companies, apologize. They took these 7 companies and they merged them together. So they took averages of FTE size. They took averages of implementation costs. They took averages of how much business and revenue, yada, yada. They put that together. They made this fictitious composite organization, if you will. So then they applied their financial model framework, and the output was the case study. So who was it that actually got interviewed? So we're going to go through this really quickly, just kind of being mindful of time here. First, we're starting out at that, energy infrastructure industry. This was a company that had a global region, size of 500 million to 1 billion in revenue, less than 500 FTEs. Their use case was around finance operations. The person that they interviewed was the manager of business applications. Next was an entertainment industry, again, global in scope, 100 million to 500 million in revenue, 1,000 to 5,000 FTEs. The use case, they were using it for finance. They interviewed their ERP manager. Specialty foods, manufacturing, and retail. This was North America only. Again, you could see the size. The use case was finance, manufacturing, operations, retail, and they interviewed the COO. Next was a general retailer, North American scope. Use case was finance, retail. They interviewed the VP of IT and the director of IT and operations. Next was apparel brand, global in scope. Finance, operations, retail again. Director of IT was involved. We had EPC contracting, global. That was around the finance, manufacturing, operations. That was the systems engineer at that point. And then also you had automotive manufacturing, North American scope. Just looking over here, looks like they were significantly this smaller of size and in revenue. And that was finance, manufacturing, operations, and that was their ERP manager. Again, just kind of holistically looking at who was interviewed, you could see that there's a healthy mix between IT professionals and business decision makers. And again, just starting with the end in mind, what was the key result from the interviews is that they were able to modernize and centralize the enterprise. And for those that are familiar with Envision Blockchain, this whole centralize the enterprise is a very good starting point to decentralize your systems. But we're not going to talk about that. We're just going to talk about what happened within this ERP system. Again, quickly scale and launch new sites. This is very big. Enhance user experience. Reduce the technical debt, gain insight into business operations, reallocate systems admin labor. We're going to quantify all these in just a moment. Increase quality, enhance productivity, and increase profitability. Of course, through these case studies, you're always going to see this hockey stick curve, right? So, just to kind of think about this, the way that they structured this, they said, okay, well, look, what are your key challenges? And what are your requirements when you wanted to implement this cloud ERP? The challenges were that there was these legacy systems inhibited growth, right? It kind of remind you of the first slide that we had from CIO.com. Next, there was organizations were blind to business insights due to siloed and inadequate data. It's huge, right? You have these business units that are supposed to roll up to you from the COO perspective, for example, or maybe you're in charge of IT and you just don't know what's going on, right? You have all these siloed systems. Imagine now how you feel in a centralized organization now having to work with a whole nother company. That's a whole nother story that we'll save for another webinar. Then we also have small businesses struggle to attract and retain capable IT staff. Again, this deals around this next requirement where top tiers capabilities covering all business units with minimal customizations. Businesses just want to be able to buy and go and then just start running, right? So then you also have this agile module environment hosted in the cloud for fast deployment and scale, cost-effective deployment, licensing, and management. I mean, these are all the requirements that was needed in order to meet these challenges. So through these 7 different companies, the composite organization created this. There was this vertically integrated manufacturer and retailer, altogether averaged out about 1 billion total annual revenue. 800 million was for the wholesale revenue, 200 million is for the retail revenue, and around 100 plus retail stores. So again, we're not going to spend too much time on who and how, but the composite organization really was around 10,000 FTEs with 2,000 employees in corporate offices, 50 finance FTEs, 400 wholesales, 3,000 retail employees, 5,000 manufacturing and supply chain employees. Just to kind of think ahead, the way that they broke that down related to the licensing costs, right? Because the finance FTEs have a different license for the software than, for example, the warehouse folks are going to have. So just kind of keep in mind that's why those numbers are important. Exactly when we're coming up with the total cost of ownership, it's important to know the licensing cost. Solution adoption, just to kind of take you through, if you had no system, how long would it take to implement something on this kind of North American or global scale over here? So phase 1 is typically implementation takes 12 months and includes full deployment of the finance, manufacturing, and operation capabilities. Phase 2 of the implementation takes another 12 months and includes, there's a typo here, this is all supposed to be 1 bullet point, again, the deployment of the retail capabilities to all 100 stores. For those that are familiar with the work that we've been doing here in blockchain, that would typically be phase 3, implementation of that sort of capability once you are already established with the business processes. And that should also be running in parallel so that business processes meet this decentralized network. But again, we're not even there. We're just working on just implementing a system to use. So when we talk about operational efficiency, this is really the calculations that came to this 3-year net present value. But again, I'm going to go quickly over here because we're running low on time, and you can always go back. All of this will be, it is recorded. It will be on demand. Ultimately, the operations efficiency came from an increase of sales order accuracy, enhanced inventory management, identifying quality or production issues early, accurately predicting production and warehouse needs, reducing delays. If you have these siloed systems that don't roll up, that don't have any sort of dashboarding, it's going to be very hard to keep track of everything. So just kind of, taking a look at some of these configurations and dashboards that we put together here. So if you were to deal with work order management, you'd be able to see, what's delayed, what's scheduled, what work orders have been there, what's scheduled, what's unscheduled. And these are the types of efficiencies that you get from modernizing the system of record that you're using. If the system of record is D365, these are the capabilities that you'll be, receiving. When we're dealing with employee productivity, again, we're talking about shop floor FTEs, reduced shop floor staffing, fully burdening hourly rates, right? These are all assumptions that you put into your calculation. But very simply put, you could see that you have this, optimization of shop floor staff. You have finance, accounting, and procurement. It's all bundled into the same solution because of the modular nature of this business application. You can enable B2B sales. You have system administration and application development. Again, the UI is important to the UX is important to the users that you roll your solutions out to. So being able to have, for example, dashboarding where you could see the summary of production floor management, and you can really see who's working on what. For example, that we have this dashboard over here showcasing that, here somebody's in testing phase, someone is in packing phase, someone else is in testing over here, right? So you actually know who's working on what, as long as everyone is adopting the solution the right way. And from an audit perspective, it really, really helps out to be able to check in onto what's happening. For example, that this individual said that, this was important for the managed code check-in and a formal production backlog and update and release process. Talking about wholesale profit that we alluded to a little bit earlier in the presentation, essentially we're talking about being able to be customer centric. This is really, really important because you need to be able to have that customer really at the forefront of your entire operations. So these customers were able to experience a better customer experience for their B2B customers, and such that customers were less likely to experience delays and fulfillment issues. And also there's a very simplified process of ordering and invoicing. Anyone that has seen the demo that we put together with what we call Radish 34, but it's really a procurement demo, just to call it simple, is that the procurement and sourcing agent, if you will, that specific role, whenever it was time to start invoicing, I mean, it was just like an automatic workflow that would then trigger from the accounts payable modules, right? So everything was all streamlined. And we're just showing you a screenshot here of the sales and marketing module that takes into account like everything that you can think about with sales and marketing. Put that into your ERP system. So all the data points are there for you to really take your business operations to the next level. Retail profit. This is really interesting because, you can think about your own kind of operations from the IT perspective, but, what happens when you have boots on the ground, right? So you have revenue per store, you have numbers of stores, baseline retail revenue, percent reduction in inventory and shrinkage, and so on and so forth. And what's interesting is that, again, out of the box, you have this integrated retail channel data that kind of flows through the entire ERP system that allows you to really take into account seasonal spikes. Like, for example, retailers are going nuts right now on Black Friday, and, Thanksgiving, we have that with grocery stores and so on and so forth. So, to be able to have all that at your fingertips allows you to really bring your business into the modern era. And as you can see right here, here's the channel deployment for all the retail stores. So each line item, I don't know, it might be hard to see here, but each line item is another store that you deployed your products to. So you can keep track of inventory very seamlessly. I know that we're a little bit over time. We're just going to go through the legacy cost avoidance. I mean, this is very simple. Avoided licensing costs for their prior solutions, the hardware refresh and maintenance costs for the servers, machines, scanners, device, and terminals. That all is really avoided by being able to leverage, the Microsoft Cloud, and they push updates automatically. It's up to the admin whether or not they want to implement those updates or kind of wait and test it out, especially in your sandbox environment. which reduces the amount of internal support. Maybe you just outsource that to a third party for generally a cheaper cost. And here's some of the metrics around the legacy cost avoidance. So we're not going to get into the detail of the analysis of the cost. Again, just wanted to keep the scope of the presentation to a minimum to the benefits. But we have implementation costs that also could vary by the third party that's implementing, for example, Envision Blockchain. You also have licensing costs that vary based on the different types of users that we were describing earlier. And then you also have your support and management costs, which aren't necessarily cheap depending on, how you outsource it. But that support and management cost is still relatively, cheaper than the cost of maintaining servers yourself. And while, the folks on this call might think, yeah, well, who hasn't upgraded to the cloud yet? There's still a business around people doing that. And there's still a need for that. So ultimately, the ROI kind of looks like this. When you put everything together, you have this cash flow table, risk adjust, that basically says that from your total costs, which is around after 3 years, you're experiencing $46.7 million of costs, but your benefits are reaching upwards of almost 80 million. So you got 74.8 million. You have net benefits of 28.1 million, which means that there's an ROI of around 60%. So you should be able to pay back that initial implementation investment by somewhere towards the end of the second year in around 20 months. Now, again, benefits change, costs change. We're more than happy to run through the scenario with you and see exactly, what these costs and benefits actually mean to your business. This is a really good starting point to actually address that. And just to kind of talk about some of the things that we've been doing with Dynamics 365, there's a procurement solution that we've been demoing for quite some time now. It is blockchain based. It's based on a use case that was introduced with the baseline protocol. For those that are not familiar with that, we really recommend that you go and search baseline protocol within, you can go to Google, type it in. You can go to our website. We have plenty of information around that. But again, not talking about that, just essentially you could take this ERP system that we just talked about and add a new capability that really helps address, for example, the volume discount problems and multi to bilateral compartmentalization problems and coopetition problems. But, basically the moral of the story is that this is an extension that is available on D365 right now. It's in the Microsoft App Store. Definitely go check that out. For those that are not familiar with who Envision Blockchain is, we saved the best for last. We're a consulting and custom application development organization that focuses around consulting and custom development, really first and foremost, where we can help your organization out with developing out proof of concepts and different MVP rollouts. We've been taking a very special approach to developing out UI, UX, to where, blockchain, as you could see some of the workshops and in the name Envision Blockchain, it's this incorporation. It's really a system integration of this emerging technology, this decentralized platform, and merging that together with something that is, as simple and as robust at the same time as something like Dynamics 365. So as you can see that we leverage all these, cloud and on-prem solutions like IoTs and different blob storage and databases and orchestrations, the Kubernetes and Dockerizations and infrastructure as code in order to make the solutions come to life. So, again, with that in mind, we're a little bit over time. I see that we still have a couple folks that are hanging out here. So we really do appreciate you coming. Feel free to send us an email at info@envisionblockchain.com. Also, you can check us out, website at www.envisionblockchain.com. Or for those that still use the phone, you can actually pick up the phone and call us, 800-513-8334. So again, thank you so much for joining. we will see you next month.